presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and powered by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Welcome to the podcast, where former San Antonio police officer, author, and pastor Tim Rupp walks you through real-life scenarios involving our police officers and digs into the depths of facts and opinions on each case. This is Cop Talk, and it starts now.
Well, hello and welcome to the Strong Blue Line's Cop Talk. I'm Tim Rupp in the Rev.FM studio in beautiful Idaho Falls, and here with me is station manager, or what is it again? Operations manager. I'm sorry, Gary Austin. The operations manager. Yeah, you know, we were just before we got on air, we were checking our mics. You didn't have me turned on. It's like it was going to be the Gary Austin show. That's what it was going to be.
Human error.
Or so you say.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have you back in the studio.
It is. Hey, a week out from Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, and I know we're still a couple weeks away, but a couple weeks right after I think the first of the year, we're going to have a special guest.
Yes.
So it's going to be cool.
I'm excited.
Just released a new book. That's all we're going to say.
Okay. All right.
He's coming up. So
I like that plan.
That's cool. And hey, today's the 18th.
Yes.
A week away from Christmas. Tonight, if you're listening to the show on Wednesday, if you're listening on Saturday and Sunday, sorry, it's gone.
It's too late.
But tonight, Wednesday night, the 18th, Carols and Cookie in the Fellowship Hall, Water Springs Church. So we're not going to have a regular Wednesday night service, which is a great services, but we're going to have the special Carols and Cookies.
Yeah.
So you're encouraged to bring about a dozen cookies if you want to do a cookie exchange. And you're like, just bring some, or you know what? Just show up.
Just show up.
Just show up and come. There's always extra food and stuff. So just come up, sing some carols and have some fun and eat some food and you know,
some fellowship.
It's preparing for the feast coming up.
Yes.
So, anyways,
that's exciting.
Looking forward to that. Hey, we got a kind of a unique show today.
We do.
But before we do that, we are going to honor officers who were killed in the line of duty on this date in history. And Gary, I have a Texas Ranger.
Oh, okay.
So you know that's from the great state of Texas. End of watch, December 18th, 1847. So this was just a few years. Now, Texas, remember, fought for her independence in 1836.
Oh, right.
From Mexico.
Okay.
So, and then I think it was 1847 she became a state. Right around that time.
Right around.
Anyways, December 18th, 1847, bold Indians raided a Texas Ranger camp and stole several horses.
Oh.
This is an Old West deal. The Texas Rangers gave chase. Following a 9-day pursuit on Saturday, December 18th, the Rangers found the Indians holed up near the headwaters of the Nueces River. Now, the Nueces River begins about 100 miles northwest of San Antonio. Okay. So San Antonio is deep in the heart of Texas, as they say.
Yeah.
And so about 100 miles northwest in Real County. And it actually flows 315 miles and dumps into the Gulf of Mexico at Corpus Christi Bay.
Huh.
So there you go. A little bit of history.
I like it.
Anyways, they found the Indians holed up there at the Nueces Rivers. The Rangers and Indians engaged in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. During the mayhem, Private Richard Gilbert and Private Littleton Raton, his first name is Littleton, Rattan, were both killed. Lieutenant Thomas Cousins was struck by an arrow and died from his wounds on January 11th, 1848. So during this raid, three Texas Rangers ended up dying because of this battle.
My goodness.
Yeah, 2 privates that died that day.
Wow.
Littleton Rattan and Richard Gilbert. Gilbert was 35, Rattan was 38, and Lieutenant Cousins, he lived a couple weeks, but he died. He was lived about a month, and he was age 35 when he passed away.
Wow.
So, yeah. What do you have, Gary?
Well, this is Corrections Officer Lisa Ann Malden, end of watch, December 18th, 2016. So about 5 years ago?
Almost 8 years ago.
It's
2024.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, 8 years ago. It's been a little while,
wow.
but still 8 years.
Yeah. Miller County Sheriff's Office out of Arkansas. So an inmate inside the detention center's kitchen assaulted 2 officers, and the one officer, Malden, was transported to the hospital. They were both transported to the hospital, but Officer Malden succumbed to her injuries at the hospital from this attack. The other officer recovered from her wounds, which is good. But the other officers there were able to subdue the inmate. He was 28 years old, who attacked the officers, and he remains in custody. He was charged with capital murder, of course.
So that what's unique about that, you have 2 female corrections officers and a male inmate.
Oh,
I was wondering how that worked. Was that at a county facility or a state? What did you say it was?
It just says sheriff's office.
Okay, so it was probably okay. So it was at a county jail. So that makes sense. The county jail, you have male and female, detention officers and so forth, and they handle both prisoners. When you get to completely separate units, that usually is like a state penitentiary.
Oh,
Where if you have a female unit where it's just females there, and you have female corrections officers.
Huh.
But in a county jail, you have
didn't
male
know
and
that.
female. Yeah, you have male and female. Now the prisoners are still separated, but when the deputies show up on duty, they work side by side with one another and stuff. Now, obviously only the female guards, the female corrections officers are going to put hands on females. I mean, that's just going to happen.
Right,
But
right.
this was, they was probably eating, they were in the cafeteria, so whatever.
Yeah,
That's too bad.
It is pretty. I mean, it is bad. It's it makes me wonder what. I mean, it is a county jail, so, but classification, I mean, should be the same. It's like, well, if depending on his charge, but it's like, why would this guy attack? I mean,
you don't know. What just happened, it was just last month. Did you hear about what happened?
Yeah.
For those of you who aren't in Idaho, there was a guy that was convicted of murder in Idaho, and he was in Boise, but then they transferred him to St. Anthony, which is on the east
work
side of the
camp.
state.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a low minimum facility where you work. You go out and you work. And this murderer was in this low level, and he escaped. He just walked away.
yeah,
And it was found just north of Water Springs Church here at the Walmart up the street.
oh yeah,
They saw him there, and then they ended up arresting him later on that night in Pocatello,
right.
south of here. So, and that's crazy. And they talked to one of the guys in charge. They said, "Hey, how did this happen?" He's like, "I don't know. I ain't got a clue, but I'm going to try to find out." So,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
is.
crazy
I mean,
things
those
happen.
mistakes do happen.
They do. That there's always human error.
There is.
And here we go. We're back to, law enforcement, whether you're inside the jail or the prisons or out, it's a dangerous profession.
Yeah.
We go back
Absolutely.
to you're dealing with bad people.
Yep.
And sometimes you let your guard down or,
Yep.
I'm not sure what happened in that case, but I'm just, it's a terrible situation.
Yeah,
But
it really is. And luckily, he didn't end up hurting anybody else. When
does it say anything about her family?
No.
No,
It just says
nothing.
that she was
Okay.
47, but
Okay. 47 years old, 2
Yeah.
years of
2
duty.
years on duty.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Gary. Hey,
Yeah.
so I mentioned, we're going to do something a little bit different, a little unique this week and next, the week before Christmas and Christmas Day itself. We're actually going to have a story told from one of my books
Great.
called Warriors for the Faith. Now,
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
you asked, Gary, what is Warriors for the Faith?
Yeah, what is it?
I knew you would ask that. So, Warriors for the Faith is a book of 9 different stories told in first persons. They're stories from the Bible. So what I do is I take a character out of the Bible and I tell his story as if I'm that person. So for example, in this chapter, it's called the In Crowd, the INN. Crowd. So
okay.
little play on words there, the In Crowd. And it starts out like this. I'd like to tell you a story. It's my story. You call it a testimony. It's a story of how God worked in my life. I was an ancient small town business owner. And so I go on like that. And actually I'm telling the story of the innkeeper.
Oh.
So I'm the innkeeper telling his story, if you will.
That is cool.
And so it's kind of fun. It gets people engaged. It really puts flesh on biblical characters.
Yeah.
And so
That's true.
you can go through, and
I like that.
it's just telling a story. Jesus told a lot of stories, so if I'm copying Jesus, that's okay. He was
I agree.
the best teacher. So
I agree.
Anyways, we're gonna listen to that. So go ahead and cue it up, Gary.
Have you ever missed something special because you found yourself too busy looking for something big? Do you sometimes feel yourself so wrapped up in living that you miss life? Have you ever overlooked the extraordinary because you thought it was the ordinary? I have on more than one occasion. One time I nearly missed what turned out to be the most significant event, not only in my life, but in the world. I nearly missed something special because I was looking for something big. I nearly overlooked the extraordinary because I thought it was the ordinary. I was so busy working, I almost missed God working. I was so absorbed in my doing that I almost missed God doing. One seemingly ordinary night, I got so wrapped up in living, I nearly missed life. I'd like to tell you a story. It's my story. You call it a testimony. It's a story of how God worked in my life. I was an ancient small-town business owner. Anyone who's tried to keep a family business profitable in a small town understands the struggles of small-town business owners. According to your calendar, I was born in what's referred today as BC. That means before Christ. You use a calendar commissioned by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582. This calendar uses the birth of Christ as the turning point in history to universally reckon time. Today, it's the most widely used international calendar. You live in the 21st century AD. AD is a Latin term, and it means in the year of our Lord. I was born BC, before Christ. The town I lived in is about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called Bethlehem. Jerusalem was the big city. It was the happening place, and much of my business depended on what was happening there in the big city. In my day, Bethlehem was just a small village on the outskirts of Jerusalem. It was too far away for people living in Bethlehem to commute daily, but it was close enough for travelers to stay when there was no lodging available in the big city. Each year I depended upon 3 Jewish feasts that brought people to Jerusalem. These were the springtime Passover feast, the early morning wheat harvest feast known as Pentecost, and a fall fruit harvest feast called the Feast of Booths. My business depended heavily on these annual pilgrimages to Jerusalem. See, I ran a small hotel in Bethlehem called The Inn. Locally, I was known simply as the innkeeper. Although regarded by many as an insignificant and small town, for a long time, Bethlehem was an important city. It's mentioned several times in the Old Testament scriptures. Jacob's wife, Rachel, the mother of Joseph and Benjamin, was buried in Bethlehem. It's where Ruth met Boaz. And of course, it's the birthplace and hometown of Ruth's great-grandson, David, who became Israel's greatest king. But most important, it was the focal point of the great promise given to Micah. Micah said, the one who is to be ruler will be born in Bethlehem. But you, O Bethlehem Ephratah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days. This was the promise of the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one, that would be born in our little town. Oh, how as Jews look forward to the coming of our King to relieve us from this Roman oppression that we lived under. But it had been over 700 years since Micah wrote those words. And to tell you the truth, most people in our little town had forgotten the promise or really didn't believe it. Sure, there was still hope that God would get us out of this Roman oppression and this Roman rule. But to be quite frank, we'd become used to it. In fact, many were comfortable with it. Rome wasn't all that bad. They let us worship as we pleased, as long as we kept to ourselves and didn't try to convert any Romans to Judaism. We were free to work and make a living, and Rome protected us from attack. It may have been a pagan and immoral society, but most Jews got along just fine. Nevertheless, somewhere deep down inside each Jew was the hope that the Christ would come and make things right. That was the state of affairs when I lived in Bethlehem and ran the inn. Like King David, I came from a family of shepherds. My father and both my grandparents were shepherds. My brothers followed suit. In fact, my younger brother's flock was in the field a couple miles from the inn when this story takes place. He and his men camped out and were watching over that flock at night. Now, I personally shepherded for some time, but I thought I'd try my hand in the hospitality business. So I sold my flock and purchased a small building and converted into several rooms to rent out to guests. Year-round, we'd have at least a few guests to help us to pay the bills. Now, Bethlehem was somewhat of a small place, and it was a small tourist town. A lot of people would go there to see Rachel's tomb or to see the house that David had grown up in his hometown and things like that. But little did we know that our small town and the major outback would become one of the biggest tourist attractions that the world had ever seen. During shearing season, we'd often have an influx of guests, mostly workers who could afford to pay for a room. These, along with the 3 big feasts I mentioned earlier, provided a decent living for the wife and me. Speaking of the wife, it was just her and me. We never had any children, but there were a number of nieces and nephews always around. My story is recorded in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2. Every year after the Fall Feast of Booths, my wife and I looked forward to the winter break. Normally, there wasn't much travel during the winter, and things slowed down in Bethlehem. During this time, I'd take the opportunity to repair things around the place. One winter, I was just beginning my routine maintenance when we were overrun by people coming to Bethlehem. It was the biggest flood of people I'd ever seen into our little hometown. This is really where my story begins in those days. When the Roman Emperor, Caesar Augustus, issued an order that everyone was to be registered. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole world should be registered. Octavian, known as Caesar Augustus, secured sole authority about 25 years earlier when he won a critical victory over Mark Antony. Since that time, Rome experienced a period of peace. In fact, Augustus was known as the Emperor of Peace. Although Rome was an occupying force, things weren't really all that bad. People looked to the government to provide peace. There were Jews on both sides of the political debate. The 2 extremes were the Herodians, who sided with the Roman government and lined their pockets from government revenue. On the other side were the Zealots, who hated the Roman government and sought at every opportunity to overthrow it. But most Jews weren't caught up in politics. They were just focused on putting food on the table, making a comfortable living, enjoying the athletic games and the beautiful countryside. The registration order was for paying taxes. Surprise, surprise, the government wants our money. The time came for those living in Palestine to register. Because the vast majority of people living in Palestine were Jewish, the Jewish tradition of census was invoked. Excuse me. This required the head of all households return to his birthplace for a registration. and all went to be registered, each to his own town. Like most typical small country towns, young people moved away from Bethlehem when they realized that they needed to make money to survive. With its large families and limited means for income, many young people moved away from Bethlehem in search of jobs. Even knowing this, when the order to register went out, I never expected so many people to show up. Our little inn quickly filled up. In fact, we were double and even triple booking our rooms. Every square foot of our lodging place was being used. For the first couple of days, people were considerate and friendly, but then things went downhill fast. Apparently, the government didn't expect so many people, and they were unprepared and disorganized. This resulted in people staying longer than they had planned. And with the cramped condition, tensions mounted and nerves quickly began to wear thin with the people in the in crowd. I was making good money, but I was beginning to wonder if it was worth it. The missus and I even rented out our own bedroom and were sleeping in the office area on a makeshift bed of straw and blankets. There was simply no more room in the inn. We were at our wits' end. People constantly complained. They complained it was too cold outside and too hot inside. Food and feed prices soared, giving them something else to complain about. Then people started discussing the topic of taxes, and that really set things off. What began as an enjoyable conversation and discussion turned to heated debates, quarrels, and politically charged arguments. Not only that, people were making a mess of the place. They left trash and uneaten food all around and didn't bother to clean up after their animals that were packed in the stables almost as tightly as we were packed in the inn. It had been several days and there was no end in sight. Day after day, people continued to knock on the door looking for a place to stay. Couldn't they read? No vacancies? Still, they came knocking. At first, I was polite and gently told them no, we were full and we had no room. But day after day and night after night, and I wasn't so civil. Soon, I just opened the door, yelled no, and slammed it shut. Just leave me alone, I thought. Let me have a little peace. One evening, as usual, right in the middle of summer, knock, knock, knock. I rolled my eyes in frustration and was relieved when my wife said she'd take care of it. Thank you, dear. Just send them away, I replied. A few minutes later, my wife returned. Honey, will you please come outside? What? Why? What's the problem, I thought. Tossing down my spoon, I got up and walked outside and found, you guessed it, travelers wanting a place to stay. Why couldn't you just tell them no? It was a strong-looking young man and his wife. Honey, this is Joseph and Mary. They've come a long way and need a place to stay, she said. Wonderful. She knows their names. Now I know this is going to be an uphill battle. Then to make matters worse, I saw that the young lady named Mary was pregnant. And boy, was she pregnant. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the son of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. My wife pleaded with me, can't we do something? They're both related to King David. I groaned. Half the people in Bethlehem are related to King David. Do you know how many wives he had? Besides, we don't have any room. There's just no place at all. The young man named Joseph spoke up. But sir, we'll stay anywhere, even out with the animals. I just need a place for my wife. She's due any day now. You're willing to stay with the animals? Yes, anywhere I can to get out of the weather and to have a little privacy, he said. All right, the stables are out back and I'll only charge you half price, I said. My wife slapped me on the arm. You'll do no such thing. They're going to stay for free. I'll not charge people for sleeping with animals. Joseph looked relieved. Thank you, sir and ma'am. I'm grateful for your kindness, and I'm more than happy to pay, he said. We'll not have it. Follow me, my wife said emphatically, leading the young couple around back. She looked back at me, "You too." I moved a pair of camels out of one of the stalls and went back to gather some hay that I could sell. Mary took a seat on a stool while Joseph unloaded their donkey. Returning with the hay, I found my wife had raked the stall clean and brought a candle from the inn for them to use. "Get more hay," she told me. "More?" I questioned. "Yes, more," she said. I thought to myself, not only am I not making money, I'm starting to lose money on this deal. And bring a feeding trough to be used as a crib, she added. This baby was quickly becoming an inconvenience in my life, I mumbled. "What's that, dear?" she said. Nothing at all," I said. For the next several days, things continued to be hectic around the inn. We were told it would be a while for the government to get everyone properly accounted for and registered. In the meantime, my wife constantly checked on the couple, giving me unsolicited reports as to Mary's condition. "It'll be any time now," she said, like the baby was somebody special, one of her own grandchildren or something.
Okay, thanks a lot. We're gonna get the second half of that. We left you hanging, so we'll get the second half of that next week on Christmas Day. And if you want to get a copy of that book, it's available on Amazon, and it's available in print form, digital, or it's even on Audible now, Gary. So they can listen to it. That's cool.
Very cool.
Hey, thanks for listening in. If you have a topic or question you want addressed on Cop Talk, please send me an email. You can email suggestions, questions, comments, or complaints to coptalk@therev.fm. That's coptalk@therev.fm. Thought from the good book today. "But you, O Bethlehem Ephratah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days." Thank you for joining us and helping to make the thin blue line a strong blue line.
Cop Talk is presented by the Strong Blue Line Foundation and sponsored by Moose Ridge Coffee in Snake River Landing, Idaho Falls. Questions and comments are always welcome by email to coptalk@therev.fm. Listen, follow, leave a review, and share this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or YouTube. And visit thestrongblueline.org to learn how you can be a supporter. Cop Talk is a Rev FM production, produced and edited by Gary Austin. Thank you for joining us on Cop Talk.